You weren't supposed to notice her. That's how she liked it. The girl with the tied-back hair and rolled-up sleeves, wrists reddened from soap and steam, folding uniforms like prayers. The soldiers passed her by every day, boots thudding on concrete floors, never realizing who they were walking past. But if you looked close enough, really close, you'd see it. The way her eyes tracked exits, how she kept count of men and machines without meaning to. She was just the laundry woman. Or so they thought. If you believe real heroes don't need uniforms to keep serving, make sure to like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you see people forever. Her name was Clara Vale, 28 years old, stationed at Camp Halberd, a dusty logistics base somewhere the Macs had stopped caring about. She worked where the walls sweated and the vents hummed, surrounded by detergent fumes and the endless churn of fatigues, gloves, and sheets. Every morning, she'd beat the dawn to the laundry shed, humming softly as if to drown out the silence. The young privates would joke about how she probably didn't even know what a rifle looked like. She'd smile politely, eyes down, and keep scrubbing. No one asked why she flinched at the sound of helicopters. No one noticed how she avoided the veterans who lingered around the mess hall, or how her hands, when they weren't trembling over hot water, were steady enough to thread a needle blindfolded. To them, she was background noise. A helper, a non-story. But every base has ghosts, and sometimes they wear aprons instead of armor. That week, things had started to feel off. Supplies delayed. Reports not matching manifests. The commander, Colonel Grayson, brushed it off as bureaucracy, paperwork lack, nothing more. But Clara felt it in her bones, like the air before a storm. She noticed small things. A tool left near the generator that didn't belong, a faint smell of solvent near the communications bay, and a new set of engineers who spoke too little and watched too much. One of them, a tall man with sunburnt skin and a patch that didn't match his accent, caught her attention the moment he stepped off the transport truck. He smiled too easily, eyes darting behind her like he was measuring something. She kept her head down, but her mind logged his every movement, the way he handled his clipboard, the weight in his right pocket, the faint bulge of something metallic under his vest. That night, as most of the base settled into sleep, Clara stayed late. The dryers rattled in rhythm, a metallic lullaby only she could hear. She folded shirts one by one, neat, precise, almost ceremonial. But her thoughts weren't on laundry. They were on patterns. She could still recall, with brutal clarity, the debriefs she used to lead. The calm before insertion. The coded language of people who didn't exist on record. Task Force Phoenix. She hadn't said those words out loud in years. She'd promised herself she never would again. But old instincts are cruel things. They wake up before you do. The next morning, Private Henson came by, a fresh-faced kid barely 20, teasing her as usual. "You ever get tired of folding our dirty shirts, ma'am?" She smiled faintly. "Someone has to keep you lot looking decent." He laughed, leaned on the counter, and added, "I bet you were in Task Force Phoenix or something." He said it like a joke. She didn't. She just met his eyes, steady, quiet, and something in her gaze made him step back. "Once," she said softly, returning to her work. He didn't laugh after that. By noon, the base was buzzing with tension. Radios flickered, static interrupting orders. 2 supply crates were unaccounted for. The colonel barked at his aides, blaming logistics again. No one suspected the engineers, not yet. But Clara saw one of them, the same man from the night before, near the restricted comms hut, fiddling with a junction box he shouldn't have access to. She dropped the stack of folded fatigues and moved, silent as breath, across the corridor. He looked up when he felt her presence. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the generator filled the space between them. He smiled again, that too perfect smile. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Laundry's the other way." She tilted her head slightly. "So is your unit insignia," she replied, nodding to his shoulder patch. His expression twitched. Just barely, but it was enough. She walked away before he could speak again. Not hurriedly, calmly, purposefully, like someone counting down in her head. When she reached the laundry room, she closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from restraint. She hadn't felt this pull in years. The urge to move, to lead, to act. She thought she'd buried it with the rest of Task Force Phoenix, in that nameless valley halfway across the world. She opened the old wooden locker at the back of the room. Inside were only a few things: a duffel bag, worn and faded, a folded patch with a phoenix stitched in silver thread, and a knife wrapped in cloth. She stared at them for a long time before closing the door again. "Not yet," she whispered. Outside, the wind shifted, a storm rolling in. By evening, the engineers had spread out, moving crates, fixing wires, talking in clipped tones. Clara kept to her station but watched through reflections: glass, water, steel. She'd done surveillance like this once, through the reflection of a whiskey bottle in a cobble bar. She'd thought that part of her life had ended. But when she saw one of them slip a device, small, black, magnetic, onto the underside of the generator's coolant pipe, she didn't think. She moved. The clang of her bucket startled him. He turned, startled, as she approached. "Sorry," she said, her voice steady, the same mild tone she used when apologizing for torn uniforms. "Didn't mean to spill." Her foot brushed the device free, sweeping it into the soapy water before he could react. The chemical fizz hissed faintly. His eyes narrowed. He didn't speak. Neither did she. They stood in silence, two ghosts pretending to belong in the same world. Then she smiled faintly and walked past him, leaving the bucket behind. That night, as lightning split the horizon, Clara sat alone in the laundry room. The machines had gone still. In the distance, alarms flickered faintly, short bursts, quickly silenced. She knew what that meant. The infiltration wasn't coming. It had already started. She touched the phoenix patch through the thin metal of the locker and closed her eyes. She'd once promised herself she'd never lead again. Never pick up the call sign they'd given her, Valkyrie 1. But promises made in peace rarely survive contact with war. Tomorrow, she'd still be the laundry woman. For now, she was remembering how to be something else. And somewhere beyond the walls, the infiltrators didn't yet know that the quiet woman they ignored was the last person on Earth they should have left alive. By morning, something had shifted. The air at Camp Halberd felt tighter, brittle with unease. The soldiers went about their routines, breakfast trays clattering, boots marching in rhythm, but the hum of normalcy was gone. Even the radios seemed hesitant, breaking into static every few minutes. The engineers were still there, moving between fuel depots and communication sheds, their credentials flawless, their smiles practiced. To most, they were just part of another dull day in logistics. To Clara, every one of them was a ticking fuse. She noticed their patterns, how they always worked in pairs, how one distracted the guards while the other checked connections, how they logged every exit, every camera angle. She didn't need to see the devices they were planting. She recognized the choreography. You couldn't unlearn that kind of pattern recognition. Task Force Phoenix had trained her to see lies in motion. Private Henson caught up with her outside the canteen, his voice trembling just enough to betray it. "Ma'am, Colonel says comms are acting up again. You think it's the weather?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were on the control tower, where one of the engineers was climbing the maintenance ladder. The storm clouds hadn't even formed yet, but the tower lights flickered like warning beacons. "No," she said finally, voice low. "Storms don't cut power in clean intervals." That evening, the base was wrapped in restless silence. The rain came without warning, sheets of it, hammering against the barracks and tents. The floodlights blurred into a haze of silver and shadow. Most soldiers stayed under cover, cursing the weather. Clara moved through it, head down, a folded bundle of uniforms in her arms, a perfect disguise for someone watching. She passed near the generator shed and froze. Through the sheets of rain, a faint light blinked, blue, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. A signal device. Someone was sending coordinates. Her instincts clicked into place before her thoughts could catch up. She dropped the uniforms and moved silently toward the glow. The door was ajar. Inside, one of the engineers knelt beside the coolant pipes, his face lit by the glow of a transmitter. His hands were steady, almost reverent, as he adjusted the dials. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice slicing through the rain. He spun around, startled. The flashlight beam caught her face, glinting off the small scar just below her jaw, the one she usually hid. Recognition flashed in his eyes, not of her name, but of her posture, her balance, the way trained operators stand when they've already planned their next 3 moves. He reached for the sidearm under his jacket, but she was already in motion. The wrench on the table clanged once, just before she drove it into his hand, disarming him cleanly. A twist, a pivot, a strike, efficient, silent, surgical. The fight lasted less than 5 seconds. When he hit the floor, the transmitter was already under her boot. She looked down at him, chest heaving softly, rain dripping from her hair. "Who are you reporting to?" she asked. He spat at her boots, defiant. She sighed. "That's what I thought." The guards arrived minutes later, roused by the noise. Behind them came Colonel Grayson, half-dressed, shouting over the storm. His flashlight swept the room. The unconscious man, the smashed transmitter, Clara standing silent beside him. "What the hell happened here?" "He wasn't fixing comms," she said evenly. "He was feeding them." The colonel blinked. "Feeding who?" She didn't answer. She just pulled something from her pocket. A small, waterproof pouch she'd kept sealed for years. She opened it carefully, revealing a faded patch, the embroidery almost worn away. A silver phoenix with its wings outstretched, marked with the number 07. "I know their methods," she said quietly, "because I designed them." The room went still. Even the storm seemed to pause, thunder rumbling distantly, as if holding its breath. Colonel Grayson looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're telling me?" She met his gaze, her eyes calm and heavy with something older than fear. "I led Task Force Phoenix. And if these men are who I think they are, they're not done yet." No one spoke after that. The colonel barked for a lockdown. Alarms blared to life, and soldiers rushed out into the rain. But Clara didn't move. She just looked down at the patch in her hand, the silver thread catching the light, and whispered to herself. It was only a matter of time. The laundry woman was gone. The commander was waking up again. The storm didn't stop for hours. Rain poured over Camp Halberd like the sky itself was trying to drown the danger out. But danger doesn't wash away that easily. By midnight, the infiltrators made their move. Fast, coordinated, almost perfect. Almost. The first explosion hit the far fuel bay, a controlled detonation meant to pull guards and power away from the control center. The second was supposed to follow, crippling comms for good. But when the infiltrator reached for the trigger, the lights snapped back on, and Clara Vale was already there, standing in the doorway, soaked to the bone, eyes cold and focused. She didn't shout orders. She didn't need to. Her voice, calm and precise, cut through the static of panic as she guided the young soldiers over the radio. "Lockdown zones free through 6. Leave the north corridor open, funnel them in." Grayson could only listen, realizing too late that command had shifted, not by rank, but by instinct. The laundry woman was gone. In her place stood Valkyrie, the one who once led a team that didn't officially exist. The infiltrators tried to retreat through the vehicle bay. Clara moved ahead of them, silent as shadow, using the base's blind spots like she'd built them herself, because, in a way, she had. The years hadn't dulled her precision. When they breached the doorway, they didn't find an unarmed woman. They found the ghost of every operation that had ever gone right when it shouldn't have. 3 men down before they even saw her face. Private Henson stumbled upon the aftermath, smoke curling, the air thick with burnt metal. He froze, watching her crouched beside a fallen attacker, disarming a charge with bare hands. "Ma'am, what are you?" he whispered. She didn't look up. "Someone who got tired of burying people she trained," she said softly, and cut the last wire. The lights flickered once more, then steadied. By dawn, the base was secure again. The infiltrators were either captured or fled into the desert. Grayson approached her in silence as she stood outside, the sunrise painting her silhouette gold and gray. She looked exhausted, the weight of memory heavy in her posture. He wanted to thank her, to question her, to understand, but all he could manage was, "You could have told us who you were." Clara gave a small, weary smile. "And what would you have done?" saluted the laundry woman. He had no answer. Later, the soldiers found her back where she belonged, at least where they thought she did. Rinsing uniforms, the rhythmic sound of water masking the chaos that had passed. The blood on her knuckles mixed with soap, fading into pale foam. Henson stood at the door, watching her. "You really led Phoenix," he said quietly. "The one they say vanished." She didn't look up. "Phoenix never vanishes," she replied. "It just burns low until it's needed again." Outside, the sky cleared. Inside, she kept scrubbing, folding each shirt with care, as if restoring order to a world that had briefly fallen apart. For the first time, the young soldiers didn't walk past her without a glance. They didn't see a quiet woman anymore. They saw the reason they were still alive. That night, when the base lights dimmed and the storm smell lingered in the air, Colonel Grayson passed her door and found her locker slightly open. Inside was the Phoenix patch, clean now, laid flat beside a small note. For when peace forgets how fragile it is. He closed the locker gently, and in the soft hum of the night, somewhere between the sound of wind and the distant rumble of engines, it felt like Task Force Phoenix had taken flight again, not with weapons or orders, but through the quiet courage of the woman who'd once commanded them and now chose to serve in silence. Clara Vale, the laundry woman, the soldier, the myth, had done what she always did. She'd kept the world clean enough to start again.